Welcome back, everyone. I am Mauricio Dominguez, lifeguard on duty and your host for Annual Conference Live 2019. We have with us today Nikki Darling Curia, who's a program manager of professional development at 0 to 3. Nikki, thank you so much for joining us today. So we know that you are scheduled to give a baby talk this Friday.
I am.
And specifically about becoming what you call a diversity ally.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us more about what that means exactly and why is it so important?
Well, I feel like it's a topic that should be important to everyone, that there is a tremendous need for more kindness in this world. And our focus at the conference, talking about mindfulness, talking about making the world better for infants and toddlers, is such an important piece of the transformation that we hope to see in the world that we leave for our children. And being a diversity ally means that everyone really has a responsibility to make sure that we are contributing to a culture that lifts people up instead of holding them down. It's important for me because I value all children's development, the diversity, that the richness that our country and that we experience globally with our colleagues and the work that we do. And I just feel that it's really important for my work at 0 to 3 as I develop professional development to share with audiences, to make sure that we're really providing it for every human that we work with.
Right, and you're speaking to this already, but when you use the word diversity, can you tell a little bit about what you mean, what that entails? Diversity in what sense?
I think in the largest possible sense that there can be. We talk about racial diversity, socioeconomic, gender, classism, ableism, homophobia, but also diversity of thought. It can be a homogenous group. It can be a community of, everybody looks the same, but people think very differently.
Right.
And it's just providing a space so that there's an us and a them, there's an us and there's others, and we want to sort of lower those barriers so that it's just all of us.
Right, great. What are the key components to being a diversity ally?
I feel there's a lot of right ways to do this, and it's not that it's not a checklist that you go through and make sure I've got all these boxes marked, but it's really making sure that you listen maybe more than you talk, that you make space for those whose voices aren't being heard, that you help send a message of equity and helping other families, recognizing their sacrifices that they've already undertaken on their own behalf, but giving space for them so that they can really share what they need and listening to what they have to say.
And what would you say is diversity-informed practice?
That really stems from work that's been conducted. 0 to 3, we work with the Irving B. Harris Foundation and their diversity-informed tenants for work with infants, children and their families. And the diversity-informed tenants are a series of very specific guidelines that frame diversity-informed practice, which is what you're asking. And those tenants speak to things like, and I'm paraphrasing that, I don't have the tenants directly in front of me, but making sure that as an ally, as an individual, that I work in a way that helps support the workforce, support the families. If I'm behaving in a certain way, I have to ask myself, is the way I'm behaving putting anyone at a disadvantage? Am I contributing to a culture of oppression instead of contributing to a culture of access and openness? And I look for non-standard or non-typical ways of knowing. So this diversity-informed practice that we engage in at 0 to 3 is that we make sure that when we're offering training that there aren't barriers to language, that there aren't barriers to to language, and it's kind of easy to think about the ones that rise to the top, but allowing opportunities for maybe not mainstream authors, and looking for sources of information that might come from not the big colleges, not Ivy League, but from lesser known universities or organizations that are doing research on behalf of marginalized communities, and finding out what they've had to say instead of listening to what all the what the white people have been saying all this time, but listen to the researchers of color, of the marginalized groups. Listen to what they have to say and look at the research.
Yeah.
Don't just rely on research that's been conducted by the mainstream
Right.
to inform marginalized communities.
Right, right. Giving voice to those who maybe don't have the opportunity to speak as much.
Right.
Right. Perfect. Can you tell us about how you in particular became committed to being both an ally and promoting diversity informed practice? So sort of how you arrived in this space, in this place.
It's every individual has a journey, and you can't tell just by looking at someone what kind of a life that they've had or the experiences that they bring to it. And especially as a white person, it's hard to make sure that I'm not putting myself in a place where I'm speaking for either other white people or for any marginalized population. So for me, I just it has felt like the most most normal extension, that there's not a difference between us and them, that it's a we. And I moved from Utah. I was born and raised in Utah, and it's a very homogeneous community, at least when I was growing up. And I moved from Utah to Washington, D.C., and that was a huge change in culture and understanding how the world really is, and not in that protected bubble that I was in.
Right.
And doing that, I also went to college. I went to Pacific Oaks College, which focuses on social justice, and have degrees in human development, and really just wanted to make sure that I could contribute to a culture of advocating and building up for other people. Also personally, my husband is from Kenya, and I have biracial children, and I just really wanted to make sure that the world could be a better future for them.
Yeah, of course. And then finally, as you sort of share your story, shifting a little bit to our viewers, what do you think our viewers can do starting today to become better diversity allies?
There's a lot of work. There's no shortage of roles that individuals can take, and I think that the most important one, I think, if you're not asking for a huge commitment right out of the gate. It might take time to build in your comfort level. Start with listening. Start with apologizing if you said something wrong. Start with asking questions if you're not quite sure how to address someone that you have differences with. If you're not quite sure of your role, ask, how can I help? How can I contribute? And taking that personal responsibility that if you see an injustice, to say something, to stand up. You don't have to defend your entire race. You just have to say, I saw something that really bothered me, and I want to do something about that. Don't be the bystander that stands by and watches as somebody is being mistreated or worse, if there's violence. We don't want anyone putting themselves in a dangerous situation, but there's so much that could be prevented if allies just said, this isn't acceptable, and standing up.
Takes courage, certainly, to do that.
It absolutely does. And like I said, I don't want anyone putting themselves in danger, but there is something, microaggressions, those little tiny things that people say, like you're in line and there might be a family of color next to you that their turn to go next, but the server calls on you. And you say, no, I'm sorry, they were here first. Just being able to make space for those that experience these kinds of microaggressions on a daily basis.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure.
That's very, very useful for our viewers at home, I am sure. Again, Nikki, I just want to thank you for taking the time to speak to us. I hope you have a wonderful baby talk on Friday.
Great. Thank you.
And to our viewers out there, make sure to tune back in for all the wonderful conversations we have coming up. And you can check all of those out at 0to3.org/AC Live.